Now, my understanding is that this is a clip of JFK from, I want to say, 1952, 1953. So this is at the very beginning of his Senate career. You could tell he looks very young here. He's clearly in his early 30s. But he had some very prophetic things to say about the Middle East.
I believe you also visited the Middle East on your trip. Now, why is it that we Americans have so many enemies in the Middle East today?
Well, I think that there's two reasons. In the first place, all of these countries, stretching from French North Africa to the South China Sea, French Indochina, all of these countries have been or still are under the domination of Western powers, the so-called white powers.
Wow.
That's awesome.
I mean, you want to talk about a man that was ahead of his time?
And there was no profit for him personally, politically, financially in taking this line in the 1950s in Massachusetts.
McCarthyism at fever pitch. Oh, yeah. Wally, can you talk a little bit about the different types of research that you've uncovered?
Yeah, definitely. And then also interesting to note regarding that is I think the French were really upset with JFK because of the fact that he was really supportive of the independence of Algeria. So that was also a really interesting kind of side thing that was going on as well with John F. Kennedy. But you know, I think that well, he was also the first Catholic president, which was kind of interesting. But I really kind of got into all of this just because I was interested in AIPAC, and I was
it's quite a rabbit hole.
Well, so I was just curious of how AIPAC is so powerful. And then I stumbled upon a website that had all the FOIA documents of AIPAC. People requested a lot of Freedom of Information Acts. And I saw all of the AIPAC documents from the 1950s all the way to AIPAC's predecessor, all the way through John F. Kennedy's administration until Lyndon B. Johnson. And then I realized while I was doing that, oh wait, there was John F. Kennedy was in a battle not just with AIPAC's predecessor, but the entire Israel lobby that was forming at the time. It was still budding, and John F. Kennedy's administration was fighting via the Department of Justice to have the American Zionist Council, AIPAC's predecessor, register as a foreign agent. His brother RFK was Attorney General at the time, and that shocked me. I was like, wait a second, what's, you know, nobody really talked about this. I never heard about John F. Kennedy having a silent war basically with the Israel lobby that was just budding. Has anybody else really looked into it? I was pretty shocked.
Ken, right down there. He wrote a whole book about it.
Exactly.
Book.
And you know, this was early. I mean, this was 2023. So nobody, I mean, the change in society since 2023 is astronomical. At the time, this was kind of really unheard of stuff on a really big mainstream level like it is now. And from there, I started looking into John F. Kennedy more. And then I started finding, I kept reading up and finding other, you know, FOIA documents that came out. I actually submitted my own to the State Department at one point, or to the National Archives, so I was able to get some documents back as well. And I realized, you know, John F. Kennedy kind of working with the Department of Justice to have the Israel lobby register was just one aspect of a much larger relationship he had with Israel, where there wasn't really just one thing that Israel didn't like about him. It was the entire relationship that Israel viewed as a roadblock to achieve its goals. And it was a very young country at the time, too. It felt like you could say now Israel really doesn't have a large existential threat aside from internally, I would say. Iran, I don't consider it as much of an existential threat. At the time, though, Israel really did have existential threats. It was surrounded by an existential threat. And that level of fear in Israel caused them and made them willing to do very extreme things in order to keep their existence. So it really was a long journey. And I'll let Ken speak a bit now. You know, the Israel lobby aspect was one part of it. And then, of course, most pressing was definitely Israel's seeking for nuclear weapons development and John F. Kennedy's disdain for that. A lot of things he was, you know, pushing for at the United Nations as well. So I'll let Ken go ahead and kind of speak from there, though.
You know, I'm going to ask, though, Wally, for you to talk about something really unreported, which blew me away when I saw it on your show. I only know you from YouTube. I'm not a TikTok guy, so that's how. So you've only been on YouTube for 3 months.
Yeah, yeah. So
Wow, I must have found your first show. Because I wonder, why don't I know about this guy? But Wally did a show about the vitriol against Kennedy in the Israeli news media at around the same, right, leading up to his assassination. I was completely unaware of that dimension of it. And I'd like Wally to talk about that a little bit, because it's kind of a big revelation.
Well, I'm glad that you guys showed this video of kind of John F. Kennedy talking about the Arab world and everything, because most people don't know this. Palestinians love John F. Kennedy. Like, they really loved him. 3 days after his assassination, Palestinians, just as a collective, they sent a letter to the State Department, sending their a letter of condolences to the State Department. That letter is still public. If you just search up Palestinians to John F. Kennedy, you'll be able to find the document. It's on the NRA website. So John F. Kennedy's relationship with the Arab world was something really unheard of at the time. And the Arab people just in general really there was a strong fondness there. And John F. Kennedy really wanted to try to play equal with them, which, as a president, that was really new stuff. I was curious to see, while John F. Kennedy was trying to stop Israel from developing nuclear weapons, while he was also, his administration, putting forward UN resolutions to allow Palestinians the right of return. That would be unheard of nowadays. That would never happen. I started pulling up Israeli media archives on what they felt about that. And they were mocking him for, a whole year prior to his assassination. Apparently, there was a artist in New York City at the time, or back in 1963, that drew a naked photo of John F. Kennedy. For some reason, it wasn't making any American headlines at all, but the Israelis were really loving that, and they were just kind of talking about this, almost just mocking the guy. Article after article, whenever John F. Kennedy would push for things at the United Nations, the Israelis would say John F. Kennedy is completely subservient to the Arabs. Really, just negative perception of him. In every single article, you really couldn't find an article where they seemed like they liked him. And this was especially true in the 6 months, 3 months leading up to his assassination, particularly because of the fact that John F. Kennedy's administration was supporting the UN resolution for Palestinians' right of return. And the Israelis thought that was a red line, complete red line. Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, actually sent a letter to Jewish American leaders in the United States at the time, stating that if the U.S. administration decides to move forward with Palestinians' right of return, Israel will see this as a greater threat to its existence, more than all the Arab armies, more than all of Nasser. Nasser was Egypt's president at the time, more than all of his Soviet MiGs. Israel will treat this and will treat this as, a common enemy and a threat, and it will fight it down to the last man. So that's how, angry the Israelis were with John F. Kennedy. So the ending was just really unfortunate.
To address the question that Peter asked way back, there was no hint of this, of this dimension, of the Palestinian dimension and the Israeli dimension, in any stuff related to the Kennedy assassination.
No.
And I'm a big consumer of that stuff. I've been reading that stuff since I was 10 years old, literally. And there's hardly a book I haven't read. And watched hundreds of hours, spent too much time on it growing up. And you don't get a whiff of any of this, which tells me perhaps the assassination research community has been controlled the last, whatever, 62 or whatever years it is.
I'm really glad you said the word controlled there, because I have a direct experience of this. There's only one subreddit for the John F. Kennedy assassination. It's JFK researchers. So it's not really a place where people send memes. It's really well-respected researchers, and they're really putting in a lot of documents and stuff. So it's a really, highly research-intensive subreddit. I have had three of my Reddit accounts banned on there, simply actually linking government documents, NRA documents, government documents related to Israel and the Palestinians. The person who runs the subreddit is a staunch Zionist. I've just shared documents of the Palestinian letter to the State Department at the time. They took it down, and the subreddit moderator banned me, stating that any accusations of such are anti-Semitic. And this is one of the most well-respected subreddits, in the JFK assassination. You can't talk about John F. Kennedy's relationship with Israel in this only JFK assassination subreddit.
Did anyone stand up? Did anyone in the subreddit stand up for you and say, "Hey"?
I did, and they did, and then the moderator would start removing those comments, stating that the comments violated guidelines. So, anybody watching this, I highly urge you guys to go into the JFK assassination subreddit. It's the largest one, and try yourself to post something. Actually post something like some research like stuff, not just memes or whatever else, and see how your post does, because they'll remove it. At least they have been for me. So I kind of gave up on that subreddit. The book, the final oh my gosh, the name is slipping my mind.
Oh, I got it. Let me grab it. Hang on.
Final Judgment is the name of the book.
Wow.
On Israel and John F. Kennedy. And that's the first book that really, Michael Collins Piper, I believe, is the one who really kind of opened the doors to this. You can't mention the book in the JFK assassination subreddit. They say that the book is anti-Semitic. And then they'll quote the Anti-Defamation League as a source for its anti-Semitism.
Oh, because they're just they're the arbiter of honesty when it comes to that.
Right.
You got to finish the video. You got to finish the video.
But before we do, Jen, what have you always said about the JFK assassination? Who stands?
Oh, it's all well with anything. Who stands to gain the most is always the person you have to look at. And I've always looked at LBJ. Always. There's no way that there's not some sort of connection there. But
and what is
we've gone down this path with Ken before.
Yes. And what is the most obvious distinction between JFK and LBJ? JFK was weary and in the end against the state of Israel. And as much as people think Trump is the biggest Zionist walking the planet today that's occupied the Oval Office, no, it's actually LBJ. So the distinction between those two on this issue is what, in my opinion, brings it all together.
Well, also, therefore, is a heritage of animosity and hatred directed against the West, and as we are the strongest of the Western powers, we fall heir to a great deal of that. Secondly, these people live on a marginal level. Their standard of living is very low. Most of them are illiterate. They have this past history of Western exploitation. The communists, or at least the Russians, have not had a comparable colonial experience in this area. They move among the people and say, how could you be worse off than you now are? Come with us and you might be better off. It's compounded by the fact that in some of these countries they have native oligarchies who are corrupt and are not concerned about the welfare of the people. All these things compound in these difficult days, make for a fertile field for communist infiltration and weakness for the West.
Well, now, what can we do, sir, to retrieve the situation?
Well, I think that the odds are against us in Southeast Asia. We might as well recognize it. But nevertheless, there are some things that we can. No, I wouldn't write it off because I don't think we can afford to do it. But I think that, in the first place, I don't see any point in giving these governments large sums of money. But I would, because a lot of it would be wasted, but I would, and we haven't got it anymore, but I would give them technical assistance. We have done that in India. We sent out people from the Department of Agriculture who showed them how to increase their food productivity, which is their great shortage. And I would support the natives in those areas and their aspirations, even if they don't always do what we want them to do. I would support the free countries of India, Asia, India, Ceylon, Indonesia, Burma. I would support the native aspirations in countries like Iran, even if it happens to be against the interests of the West. That's right. And their attempts and liberal groups, and even if they happen to be working against the Western powers with which we're closely allied. I think we have to support the natives in their attempts to be independent, or otherwise those areas will be seized by the communists.
So his real motivation was keeping it from the communists, okay, but yet he does seem to have a certain amount of empathy for the natives.
Well, one of the things that I'm sure, Ken, in particular, you came across in your studies is that Kennedy was considered a hawk to some degree when it came to communism. That obviously evolved pretty quickly, and I would say the Bay of Pigs is obviously what completely changed it in like overnight in a way. But he doesn't come off like a hawk in the sense that he thinks we need to bring war everywhere. He's just, again, this is 1952, 1953, and he's saying Southeast Asia is not a good idea. We should not be getting involved in that. So anyone who suggests that he was advocating for war in Southeast Asia and Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, again, here's from a time in which you would consider him somebody who is somewhat of a hawk. And this is at the backdrop of the very end of the Korean War. So I would think that while he's not completely where he would ultimately end up, you can already see that this is a guy that was way ahead of his time.
Well, he did. He believed in a strong U.S. military. He believed the Soviet Union was a threat, and he was he was practical, but I think it was sincere human feeling. why don't we make friends? Why don't we help these people who are, all they want is what we wanted? He gave that speech when he congratulated the people of Algeria. He did a television spot. And Wally, I don't know if you ever saw it, but he did a television spot to congratulate the people of Algeria when they won their independence.
No, I didn't see that. Send me the link later.
It's incredible. And he says, hey, we fought for our freedom. You fought for yours. It was hard, but it was worth it. He was right on national TV with that. So, yeah, I mean, he's a politician and he is an elite person. But I think he was a decent person. And to talk about the nuclear weapon issue, remember, he worked very hard to get the nuclear test ban treaty.
Yep.
And that was step one of putting a freeze on the development of nuclear weapons. And I think his third phase, if I understand it correctly, what he wanted to do was start dismantling them. And that probably made him a lot of enemies as well. And while he was doing that, the director of counterintelligence, James Jesus Angleton, was working with organized crime to help steal nuclear material from a Navy contracted plant owned by a Zionist in Western. Can I say that, or am I an anti-Semite?
You already are, but your anti-Semites are allowed on our channel, so please continue.
I am not an. If I'm an anti-Semite, I wouldn't like Wally either. It's such a crazy thing.
That's more true.
Yes.
It's so crazy. It's so we are the only Semites. No,
We're not Semites. As a white
first of all, you're not a Semite. You're not even remotely a Semite.
No.
It's just it would be a comedy if the results weren't so tragic, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I like that. Regarding the nuclear treaty and James Angleton, when Kennedy made the nuclear treaty with Russia, or the USSR at the time, James Angleton was infuriated, was super against it. And the Israelis reached out to John F. Kennedy, was Levi Eshkol at the time, the second prime minister of Israel, when the first one, when Ben-Gurion stepped down. And they kind of gave him a backhanded compliment when Kennedy made the deal with the USSR. And they said, oh, okay, well, it was great to see that you were able to push for the nuclear treaty because of your hard-headedness, in a way, is what they were basically saying while they were fighting with him about making sure that they'd be allowed to develop nuclear weapons. So, I mean, the Israelis, along with Angleton, were infuriated that Kennedy was actually making, trying to have some sort of nuclear ban, trying to have some sort of peace deal with the Soviets. They were infuriated. They wanted the complete opposite. So,
again, in the end, it's all about money and power. That's all it ever was about. And now, what is the motivation to bump up our military spending from 1 trillion, which is insane, to 1.5 trillion? What are they trying to do? Start World War III and bankrupt our country at the same time?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know when it's. I don't know at what point they'll be satisfied. I mean, how much longer can this go on? And I'm shocked that people the people in power don't recognize that. I've been reading up a lot on the Roman Empire recently, actually, and what the Romans were saying at the time about the overextension of their military, the corruption in their government. We are on the exact same trajectory of at the late stage Roman Empire. And it's shocking that, we're going down this path and there aren't enough people saying, hey, look where we're at. This is not sustainable.
Propagandized nation.
Yeah.